Well, aren't you a regular Nancy Drew?
For men, it's called a Hardy Boy.
You think you can follow the clues and solve the case of the missing condiment, Nancy Drew?
Because I've read every Nancy Drew mystery ever written.
Nancy, please tell me you're joking.
Wow, you suck at this Nancy Drew stuff. You should get a new hobby.
My name is Carson Drew, and this is my assistant, Nancy.
Nancy Drew.
It's curtains for you, Miss Drew.
Nancy Drew strikes again.
A regular Nancy Drew.
Well, hello, regular Drews.
Or regular Hardy Boys. Hello.
Regular Hardy Boys, hello, welcome. Oh my God.
This is so exciting.
So exciting. We are covering, for the first time ever, a Hardy Boys book. The very first one, The Tower Treasure.
Yay!
I'm so pumped, Kori. So this one came out, the original text was released in 1927. The revised text was released in 1959. The original ghostwriter was Leslie McFarlane, famously so.
Of course.
I have never read a Hardy Boys book before, Kori. This is my very first one.
Same.
I've never read, outside of the super mysteries, which I guess is the closest I've come to reading a Hardy Boys book, which is, let's be honest, it's not.
Yeah.
I've never. It was so weird.
Yeah.
Did you have like a weird experience with it too? Like, not bad.
It's very surreal.
It's just like alternate universe. What's going on?
Yeah.
Like, I felt like, I was reading an alternate universe Nancy Drew book, which is like, I guess technically this is exactly what this is.
Yeah. No, true. Yeah.
But it was so weird to read about boy teen detectives over girl teen detectives. And the vibes were like really similar, but also kind of different. And you can read it exactly to the gender. Like, it is so due to the gender. It's crazy. Yeah.
Well, and I'll say as well, I only read the revised version.
Same.
You read revised as well. Yeah. I'm kicking myself that I didn't get the original text and read it in time because I'm very, very curious what that would have been. But this, like the first page, you read it, you're like, Harriet Stratemeyer wrote this. You can tell just straight off the bat. And so I think maybe that's why it's so familiar, because it is, we're so familiar with her writing style and her structure that she uses. Yeah. So obviously very similar in that regard, but I'm curious how close the original text would have been for that reason. Because I believe, Edward Stratemeyer would have written the outlines for these because he would have still been around and running things back then. So
Well, no, I saw on, I think Wikipedia, I saw that the original text, Tower Treasure, Hardy Boys book, was like top whatever, like it was like some incredibly well lauded like children's literature book, like some of the best writing in children's literature that exists.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you said it was like top 10 of all Stratemeyer books ever, right?
Of all children's books ever.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Let me look at it again just so I could read it one more time. This book is one of the original 10, generally considered by historians and critics of children's literature to be the best examples of all the Hardy Boys and Stratemeyer Syndicate writing. Oh, no, just kidding. You're right. It is Stratemeyer Syndicate writing. Stratemeyer. But of all Stratemeyer Syndicate writing, which is pretty prolific. So, I'm fascinated. I really wish I'd read the original text, too.
Yeah.
I did love the revised text. I think it was good. But I'm curious to what they changed because I'm sure it was a significant revision. So
I've heard that it's the same plot, but obviously even in the cases where it's the same story, we have tons of changes. So.
Right. And
the writing is going to be very different.
Well, and I wonder like what is different about the portrayal of Red Jackley. And there's another character who's homeless at the end of the book, and I'm like, oh gosh.
How did we handle him?
Yeah, how did that go? So
oh man, this definitely made me appreciate Nancy more than ever.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the best way to describe this one.
Well, I think I really liked it, and I liked the way that I think this book represents a little bit more stereotypically detective fiction, in my opinion. Like, Frank and Joe actually do legitimate, like, detective work in a way that I think Nancy Drew a lot of the times doesn't. Like, clues tend to just kind of fall into Nancy's lap a lot of the times. She's not actually going out to find them. Whereas the Hardy Boys put in the work to do it. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of sexism in that, I think. Yeah. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing that. And it made me feel like, well, I just want Nancy Drew to be doing these things. I don't want to read about these boys doing these things. You know what I mean? Like, the book literally opens with them riding motorcycles. And I'm like, you would never see this in a Nancy Drew book. No. Never. Nancy would never even get on someone's motorcycle. She might get on like a moped in like Italy or something. Sure. But she is not riding a motorcycle down the country roads of River Heights. Like, get out of here. Get out of here. And so just to like get to see Frank and Joe doing these things made me a little salty that Nancy didn't get to do them.
At the same time, though, I think maybe the biggest surprise to me in this is that the Hardy Boys are not super extra special remarkable like Nancy is. Nancy is good at everything she tries. She's got every skill in the world, and it's just her. I felt like we met every single person in Bayport in this story, and it's not just Frank solving the mystery. It's not just Joe. They're working together, but they also need Fenton's help, and they also need like 6 of their friends' helps. Nancy would just do it herself. Bess and George might be there with her, but she's doing all the work herself, and she's doing everything alone, and she can still do it as well as they do, you know?
This is the thing, right? Because it's like, I can see how like a young girl reading this, like this wouldn't necessarily fit the female market, like, or the young girl market. Like, reading this, I don't know, as a child in the, 30s or whatever, like, yeah, I probably wouldn't be super interested because they're just regular boys or whatever. But then the thought, though, is that like, oh, well, you can't just write a book about a regular girl. She has to be special in some way to warrant it. Whereas that's obviously, that comes from sexism, right? Like,
boys don't have to be remarkable.
They don't have to be remarkable to get to do these things.
Yeah. All they have to do is aspire to be a cop someday.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's it. Whereas Nancy has to be the best at everything. She has to be a role model. She has to be perfect. She has to look perfect, say the perfect things, be the friends with the right people, like have a lot of money, like just like the pinnacle of like what a young woman could be at that time. Nancy has to be that. Whereas Frank and Joe just get to be normal teen boys. Yeah. But yeah.
I thought that was so surprising because I thought for sure that they were going to be Mr. Remarkables.
No.
That they are the most up and coming, amazing police officer or potential police officers in all of history. No, they're just some kids whose dad is a cop and so they want to be a cop someday. Yes. It's just,
I will say Fenton in this book, though, is definitely God level status.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just the hero worship that I think Frank and Joe have for him, but he can do anything. So Fenton is a little bit more of our Nancy Drew character in this book than Frank and Joe are, honestly.
A little bit,
yeah. And I think Frank and Joe, honestly, no offense, and this might be due to some of the revision, I don't know, but they kind of seem like they have no personality.
True.
Like,
they really don't.
Only personality is that they are like in love with their father, not in like a creepy way, but like in like they absolutely worship him, worship him. Yeah. To the point where it's like, what do you think, Joe? What do you think, Frank? I don't want to hear about what Fenton thinks. I want to know what you think, you know? So that was interesting. And that's way different than the Nancy Drew books. I think that's probably the biggest marked difference for me is outside of like the, like, they get to ride motorcycles. They actually get to go out and investigate the crime without having to like be chaperoned or like check in with someone first, really. But the biggest difference was their relationship with Fenton and how much more Fenton is involved in the story than in most Nancy Drew books, where Carson is not that involved. Like, he's usually present and Nancy usually like runs stuff by him, But the case in this book is Fenton's, and Fenton is actively investigating it. And the boys, even in some parts, are just tagging along with him.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, even if Carson is investigating in a Nancy Drew book, typically we're not with him. Typically we are off doing another part of the investigation and then checking in with him about what he's learned. Like, we're not doing it together. We're kind of splitting up as opposed to working as a team, you know? So that's interesting.
It makes me very curious about what the rest of the series looks like. Because, I mean, I think if we're all honest with ourselves, Hidden Staircase is a way better book than Old Clock was. So if this is supposedly like the best one, what is the rest of the series like? Is their second book secretly the sleeper hit? Or is it kind of downhill from here? I don't know. You know?
That's a good question.
Not that they would be bad by any means.
Right.
Not like everything sucks besides this one. Not trying to say that at all, but just very curious of like, what is everyone else's opinion on where this book falls for you, ranking wise? So
I wonder too if like the whole like difference between the portrayal of Fenton and Carson is because the Hardy Boys books were more influenced by Edward Stratemeyer than the Nancy Drew books were, obviously because he passed away very shortly after they just got published. And so I wonder if the relationship written into here between son and father is like more about Edward Stratemeyer being someone's son, whereas Nancy Drew is like more indicative of the relationship of a daughter and a father, more heavily influenced by Harriet Stratemeyer Adams, and so like more distant, you know?
Yeah, because
they don't have as much in common necessarily, right? Fascinating.
It is
fascinating stuff. That's what I most felt when I was reading this. I was just so fascinated by what was going on, by what was reading, and not because like the mystery is anything particularly special. It's great. It's a good mystery, but it's like, it's not, that wasn't what was interesting to me. What was interesting to me is seeing the difference between what was portrayed here versus what was portrayed in Nancy Drew.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the mystery, I'll be honest, you guys, the mystery wasn't the strongest. I felt like the pacing was a little bit weird with how the story was actually told. Yeah. It's the details of how it's different than Nancy.
Yeah.
One other big difference that really, really stood out was there is so much, obviously, Fenton as a police officer, we admire him because he's our dad, but it's way more than that. It is the police are put way up on this pedestal. The police are the best thing that could ever happen, and it's almost a naive attitude, in my opinion, to be so police worshipy in this case. And it's very different than Nancy, because obviously Nancy is still very much like, the right thing is the right thing, and the law is there for a reason, but it is more of like respect for the law than it is respect for the law enforcement of Nancy Drew, that it's more of like right and wrong versus just like you broke a law.
These guys are so cool, right?
Yeah,
like, because
exactly.
That's what Frank and Joe are thinking and saying the whole time. Is they're like, cops are so cool. We want to be cops so bad. Our dad is so cool. We love our dad so much. He's so smart, or whatever. There is like this private investigator character
that we look down upon.
That we look down upon
because he's not good enough to be a cop.
He's not good enough to be a cop. Yes,
and therefore he's worth deriding and making fun of and trying to trick him into not solving the case.
Right.
It's very interesting the way that we navigate that, and it's not just a solidly right versus wrong. It's how much can we praise the police in the process of this, you know?
Right. Whereas like, and I wonder too, again, this goes down to gender dynamics, right? It's because like Frank and Joe see being a police officer as a legitimate career opportunity for them.
Of course.
Like that is a path that they can take and that they want to take. Whereas for Nancy, that's not an option. She can't be a cop. She's a woman. She's never going to get to be a cop.
Maybe she could be a lawyer, but probably not.
Probably not. So it's like, so she, while she, yes, has an inherent like moral respect for the law and for those who uphold the law, she never feels like they're not role models to her. They can't be role models to her. It's not a, you know, an opportunity that's available to her. So sometimes she will work with them. Sometimes in the original text versions, she kind of works not against them, but like in spite of them, right? But
which that's interesting how that changes throughout the series too, going from that to like now the police are basically my errand boys. In some cases, you know.
So it's just an incredible like look at gender dynamics, like reading a Hardy Boys book versus reading a Nancy Drew book. It's fascinating to me. You could write You could write like a novel on this. You could write a
maybe someone
thesis
should.
on this
Yeah.
because it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Also, the Hardy Boys are in school.
Yes.
And so is Callie.
Yep.
So is Iola.
Mm-hmm. Chet.
Why is we still, I mean, the girls in the story are also students.
Oh, yeah.
Why is, we still don't know why Nancy's not in school at this time. Is it because she is too rich to really need it? Like, you know, once you get past 16, it's kind of optional for girls because you're not going to have a career, Nancy. Why would you need to learn to read better? Like, you know?
I wonder if she went to like a finishing school or something where she graduated at 16 and then she came out, right? Like that was the trajectory for a lot of young women at the time, at the turn of the century. So you went to a finishing school as soon as you were quote unquote finished, ladylike enough to be presented. You were presented to society. You dated, quote unquote, a few people, chose someone, got married.
Yep.
So, yeah, maybe that is where that comes from.
But why was Callie allowed to go to school and Nancy's not? That bothers me. Is Callie just not rich enough for
I think
that?
Callie's not rich enough. I think Callie's not upper class enough to have warranted that. Because I do think that Bayport is portrayed as being a little bit more rural than River Heights. That could just be an impression of mine at this stage, but like I know River Heights has like adjacent really rural towns that Nancy visits quite frequently, but Bayport itself felt smaller than River Heights to me, and I think part of that is just because it seemed like Frank and Joe were interacting with literally everyone. Like they would just walk down the street and like they're like, oh, we know that guy and that guy and that guy. And Nancy does know a lot of people, but it doesn't feel like she knows everyone.
True.
And so that's what gave me the vibe is like maybe Bayport's a little bit smaller, a little bit more rural, a little bit less wealthy maybe in general. But I don't know. That's just a feeling I had. But
because Bayport is supposed to be an East Coast, it's very like good proximity to New York. It's easy for them to kind of get there within a few hours. So
which would make you think the other thing.
Right, yeah, because I assumed that it would be more like maybe it is a small town, but it is in a very dense populated area, but it also is the 50s, so maybe it is more common for you to know all of your neighbors back at that time.
Yeah.
Where Nancy, she's kind of out in a more very rural place, the Midwest, where it's just farmland between all these towns, and maybe it's a matter of time that I don't have 2 hours to drive over to the next closest town and know everybody there just because it is so far away kind of a thing. That she does know her little community, but because it's so insulated, I don't know. Yeah. I could be totally wrong here.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
Anyway.
Just a thought. But yeah.
Very interesting. Having to schedule our mystery time around our classes. And like, okay, finally some logistics here. Like,
Although also I will have to say, because this is our whole cap on our Nancy Drew Hardy Boys crossover little section or whatever, just from reading this book, I can totally see why the very first time Frank and Joe Hardy meet Nancy Drew, they become obsessed.
Yeah. And I can also totally see where the treatment of Frank towards Nancy in the 77 show came from, with the little bit of a sexist attitude towards her.
Yeah. He's sometimes kind of patronizing towards Joe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I could only see how that would get worse if it was a woman instead. So
yeah. So I will say in the revised text, Frank and Joe are supposed to be 17 and 18. We had that question the other day, if they were 16 and 18, or if there was I still don't know what they were in the original text, but in this version, they're 17 and 18.
Should we talk about the cover art?
Yes. So this one does have a few different versions of the cover art. I don't know if you see, I linked to the hardyboysonline.net website, which is very helpful in looking at the cover art. If you
oh, very nice. Of course, we've had some Tandy and some Gillies. Obviously, Nappy did almost as many Hardy Boys as he did for Nancy. So the cover that I have for the revised is a Nappy.
Yeah, same. I have the same one that you do. But yeah, so the very first one was from Walter Rogers, I believe. And then he also did a new updated cover in 1933. And then we had someone else do one in 1944. Who was it? Scott still it's credited to. Hold on, let me go
A.O.
back.
Scott.
A.O. Scott. And then Nappy did the revised text 1959 cover. And all of them kind of feature a similar scene except for the 1944. Well, I guess that one's even kind of similar. But it features both of the Hardy Boys standing outside of the Tower Mansion, which is this location in the book, as someone is shining a flashlight down out of one of the windows in the tower. I do love the Snappy version. Because the boys look so young, though. They don't look like 17, 18. They look like they could be 14 in this, honestly. But their little, like, coordinating shirts.
They're so cute. They match.
Joe, I guess, is wearing, like, a red sweater with, like, a green plaid collar under it. And Frank is wearing a blue sweater with a red plaid collar under it. So freaking precious.
They are our classic all-American boys, and that's what this story is. Yeah,
the first one
are as patriotic as could be.
Yes.
Truly.
Oh God, yes. The first one is a little bit. Obviously, their fashion looks a little bit more 1920s, 1930s adjacent. They're wearing the newsboy caps, and they're wearing. I think Frank or Joe, one of them is wearing like a. It's kind of hard to see in this picture, but like a sweater over a shirt, and I think the other one is wearing like a checkered shirt tucked into some pants. Pretty interesting. And then the second one is the same. The Scott cover, the A.O. Scott cover, is the only one that's pretty different. It came out in 1933, and it seems to feature a little bit of a different perspective in the first two and Nappy's revised text. The boys are kind of off to the side and kind of looking to their right at the tower, but the Scott one has both of them kind of directly in the foreground and the tower in the background. You can't even actually see Joe's face in this, and you only see Frank in profile. And they're also both wearing blazers, which is funny.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think I prefer the Nappy one, honestly,
Yeah,
even though they kind of look like babies. Yeah.
I do too, for sure. It's
Very
the most
strong.
bright. It's the poppiest one. The colors are the strongest on it, which makes sense. This came out in 1959. We were about to be in the 60s. So that's how art was looking those days. And yeah, I think because you also get the most face. You get to see the most face of both Frank and Joe. So it's more expressive cover. Yeah.
And I just love Nappy. Anything he does, I'm a fan of. So.
Obviously. Yeah. Okay. 3 words?
I feel like we spent so much time in wig stores, like a disproportionate amount of time in wig stores, that I feel like wigs has to be involved in this somehow.
Funnily, that's so true and totally. But funnily enough, I like cut a lot of that out of our summary because I was like, this doesn't matter at all.
No, it doesn't. Like I said, with the story feeling disjointed, it's like, okay, this thing happens. And then we're going to go to a wig store because we're convinced that that's going to give us the answers. And then like a separate thing happens and the first thing gets wrapped up. But now we're back at a second wig store. And then that thing gets wrapped up. And then we just kind of like we keep moving on to a different topic. And it's like, is it just one mystery or all these like weird things just going to keep connecting in this line? I don't know.
With wigs somehow being the thing that connects them all.
And we are just so convinced that somebody with their real hair color could not have pulled this off. You could only pull it off if you were deceiving people with your hair color.
So wigs. And then I also think it needs to be like chums or fellows. They also use the word fellows a lot. They're talking about their friends.
Yeah.
So wigs, fellows. And then I think like, I want to say like planes, trains, and automobiles.
Okay.
But like that's 3 words altogether. So I want to just say like automobiles, you know?
Other than the stolen car, I feel like it's more motorcycles than anything, you know?
I think we talk about every single mode of transportation except for boat in this story. So we've got motorcycles. That's our 2-wheel automobile. We've got cars, car theft. They take a plane to get to New York. The whole train station situation plot and the guy getting injured on the train tracks. Like so much train like stuff.
True.
I just feel like that's like the whole like, and it's such a boys story.
Yeah.
That it feels like it's so central. Like this is like, okay, I get why boys were obsessed with cars and stuff. It's because of this book.
I'm surprised we didn't get a boat with our proximity to the Atlantic. And I've read that pretty much all the other ones have some sort of boat situation involved. So that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But then just also our police obsession. We spend so much time admiring the police that it feels like a central point. I don't know. It's hard. We might need 4 words this time,
We might
guys.
need
Just so
4.
we can add wigs on there.
Wigs, cars, chums.
General transportation drama.
Yeah. Police.
Yeah. Police.
Good enough.
Yeah.
We couldn't distill it any further. Sorry. Sorry,
That's
regular
close enough.
Drews. Or regular Hardys, I should say.
Very true.
Shall we jump in?
Let's do it. Yes.
Okay, so like I said before, this book starts off with some pretty serious action. The Hardy Boys, Frank, who is 18, and Joe, who is 17, are riding motorcycles to a nearby town to deliver some legal papers for their father, Fenton, who is this famous detective, when they are nearly driven off a steep cliff by a speeding car. I will say this is a really classic Stratemeyer Syndicate opening.
Yes.
Nancy also frequently delivers legal papers for her father, so I just feel like this is just something that kids did these days. I guess.
Well, and think about how Old Clock opens, where Nancy is driving down the road, and then the little girl almost gets run over by the truck, and so we have all these automobile dramas again with the big opening. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me so interested in like the role of like the car and like these kind of detective novels. Like, when we've talked about this before in other episodes, how like Nancy wouldn't be the same and the mysteries would not be the same without her blue roadster. Like, it just couldn't happen if she wasn't able to travel. So fascinating. And fascinating too, I think, if we're portraying the Hardy Boys too as being a little bit less wealthy than Nancy, that they have motorcycles instead of a car, because those would have been much cheaper.
I believe that at some point in our research, we learned that this was a side effect of World War II, that they started riding bikes and motorcycles after World War II, because, again, we are the perfect all-American boys.
Right.
We need to support the war efforts, right?
Yes. So support it, but not talk about it because we don't want it to become outdated, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Fascinating.
But always wearing our red, white, and blue.
So this actually happens twice in a row to them. They almost accidentally get driven off the road by the same car, who's just like driving maniacally down this mountain road or something. So after they deliver these papers for their father, they decide to take a different road home to hopefully avoid whoever that person is. And on the way, they stop and visit their friend Chet Morton. So Chet is a recurring character, I believe, in these Hardy Boys books, and he is given a pretty detailed description in this first one. He is described as being, quote unquote, plump. Ready for it, guys?
We can't not have a fat character to dog on the whole time. Yeah.
Gosh, yeah. He is a school friend of Frank and Joe's, and he loves cookies and eating and all of that stuff. He does have one other interest, and that is in his car. He is very in love with his car, which is this yellow jalopy that he has named Queen, which is, I think, pretty sweet. As the Hardys approach his farm, which is just a few miles outside of Bayport, they see the same car that had sped past them before, but it's in a ditch. So the driver must have like crashed, but they go and they look at it and the driver is not there. So they must have left. Chet meets the Hardy Boys at the gate to his farm, and he asks them if he saw anyone driving Queen because it's just been stolen out of his garage. And so our kind of working theory here is that the driver of the other car ended up sneaking onto Chet's farm after he crashed his car and stole Chet's car Queen to be able to get away. And so the Hardys and Chet kind of take off on their motorcycles to see if they can kind of try to track down Chet's car. They drive into town and they see Callie Shaw, another recurring character. She is described as being the frequent date of Frank, who, quote unquote, liked her better than any girl he knew.
Aww.
So far.
Yeah, this makes me feel bad. I'm like, I can't root for them because I want him to be with Nancy. But
I know.
I like Callie, so.
I like Callie fine too, but I can totally see why someone would dump Callie for Nancy in a heartbeat. Yeah. Sorry,
Callie.
Sorry, Callie. So they explain to Callie, oh yeah, she's upset when they run into her because she's just dropped her cake that she's baked for a neighbor. Like she baked a cake for someone who is ill. So she's a very sweet girl. I don't want to say bad things about Callie, but just not as exciting as Nancy Drew. Anyway, she's upset because she dropped this cake because someone driving Chet's car, who she actually thought was Chet because it was the yellow jalopy. So she's like mad when she sees him. She's like, Chet! You made me drop my cake. He's like, what? And she tells them that someone was driving his car past. So they're like, oh, no, Chet's car was stolen. We're trying to find it. Did you see who was driving his car? And she says, no, but she did see someone with red hair in the cab. And the Hardys also saw someone with red hair driving the car that nearly ran them over. So we think it's probably the same guy. So they head into the police station to talk to Chief Collig, who is the Bayport police chief. And when they get there, they see this ferry ticket seller talking to the chief already. And he's explaining that he was just held at gunpoint by a man who drove up in a yellow jalopy. And then another passenger ended up coming into the ticket office, and that guy who came in fled. Okay, so we're beginning to develop a little bit of a picture of the events here. So Frank, Joe, and Chet explain the car theft to them and how they believe that like this is the same man who held up the ticket seller and the same man who stole Chet's car and drove them off the road. It's odd, though, because the ticket seller remembers that this man who came in didn't have red hair. He had dark brown hair. But another witness says, no, he did have red hair. So, okay, this is where we develop the theory that this man must be wearing a wig. And of course he is, which we'll find out later, but it's just crazy. It's not, oh, we don't think that the ticket seller was in like a really stressful situation and misremembered the hair color of the guy who was holding him up. No. He had to have been wearing a wig.
Clearly.
So Frank and Joe head home, and we meet Laura Hardy, their mom. Yay. She's in this book. Unfortunately, not a very big role. She's just kind of a homemaker. Really only exists to make us food. Mm-hmm. That's really it. Yeah. She doesn't even, I don't think she really has that many lines.
No.
Yeah.
Unless it's like concern over Fenton or about them and what they're eating. She doesn't say much or do anything much. Yeah.
Which is too bad. And then we meet Fenton. We learn that he used to be a very important New York City detective, but moved to Bayport to open his own private detective agency.
Even though he still fully like works with the cops and they give him 100% access to all of their evidence and files and anything that he wants, which is weird to me. I don't think that would happen ever.
Well, Kori, you have to understand, he was so famous as a New York City cop that everyone just wants to work with him.
Sure. Sure.
I'm just speaking tongue in cheek. It's weird.
No, I know. It's weird.
It's weird. Yeah. But so Frank and Joe explain the case to him so far and their desire to keep trying to work on it to try to find Chet's car for him. And Fenton kind of immediately zeroes in on this thought that this guy might be wearing a wig. And he encourages Frank and Joe to go around to all the local wig stores to see if they can track him down. This is kind of a whole subplot that you were talking about before, where they end up like going to this wig store and like helping this like the proprietor like unbox stuff just because I guess they're good people or whatever. And then they like Frank puts on, it's also a costume shop, so Frank puts on like a costume and then the door, someone comes knocks on the door and they think it's maybe the guy, like it's like the thief guy, but we don't think it is because Frank shows up in the skeleton costume and it scares them and they leave. And anyway, it literally doesn't matter. They don't learn anything about the wig.
We spend so much time in the wig store. So much time.
So the next day after church, of course, we had to get a mention that it's Sunday and the boys regularly attend church because they're good all-American boys.
Of course.
So after church, Frank and Joe go to pick up Callie and they head to Chet's house for dinner. We meet Chet's little sister, Iola, who Joe likes very much. Interesting. And they all make dinner together. I thought this was a really interesting scene because Chet's parents, Chet and Iola's parents are like gone. They're like, I guess out to dinner at someone else's house. And so it's like all of these like teens like preparing dinner together, which is like not that like, I don't know. I just feel like you would not see teenagers doing that today.
No, they would order a pizza and be watching a movie instead, you know?
Right.
Like,
yeah. So yeah, they tease Chet for being quote unquote big. And then during dinner, Chet ends up getting a phone call and he comes back to the table and tells them that he's just been threatened. Someone called and said that if Chet doesn't stop trying to find him and the missing car, that he would get hurt. So after hearing this, Frank kind of glances outside and then he sees a figure sneaking out of the barn on Chet's farm.
so they all run outside after him, but by the time they get out to the barn where he is gone. They look inside, and what do we find on the ground? A wig. But it's a gray one this time, not a red wig.
Or a brown one.
Right, or a brown one. So clearly this man has multiple disguises, and he must have dropped this in his hurry to leave. They search around a little bit more, and Chet realizes, oh, okay, the reason that this guy was here is he came back for my spare tire. Because the spare tire is now missing from the garage, obviously.
This is hashtag brutal. Like,
right?
Not only does your car get stolen, but the thief comes back to steal your spare tire. You can't have anything. You can't have one vestige of this car.
Oh my gosh. So there's not much we can do. So they go back inside, they finish their dinner, but then they get another call. This one is from a private detective named Oscar Smuff, who is the guy we were talking about a minute ago, who they kind of look down upon him because he's not good enough to be a police officer. He has to be resigned to private detective work, even though that's also what Fenton does. Whatever. I think they'll mention later that he'd like tried to be a police officer and he didn't make the cut or whatever.
Yes, they do. Yeah. But he's also portrayed as being like a little bit sleazy, like on the sleazy side, and like not having scruples, which I think is also an issue that they have with him. So,
which would only apply to you if you weren't good enough to be a police officer. Had he passed the exam, I'm sure he'd be very upstanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And all of the, tricks or whatever he was using would be seen as being really smart. And wow, what a good detective he is, using his resources like that and pulling one over on the bad guys. Right.
But he's an annoyance to us in reality. But he tells Chet, I know where your car is. And for the low price of $25, which, what was that at the time?
Let's see. $274.
That's quite
74
steep.
cents.
Yeah. So for $275, he's going to tell him where the car is. But Chet's like, I don't have that much money. So they pool all of their money. I think they end up with like $15, but the Oscar Smuff agrees. He's like, all right, I'll take the cash and we'll go. And Frank is like, hold on, just to be smart, because I don't think this guy actually has any real information. Make sure that you'll tell him like he's not getting his money unless we actually find the car. So Smuff drives over to the farm, picks them up, and is going to take them to wherever he says this car is. And so Frank, Joe, and Chet all go with him. They do find a car that looks pretty much like Chet, except this one is not yellow.
Pretty big difference.
Right. And so they're like, well, it's clearly not the same car, right? And he's like, no, you kids just don't understand. The bad guy painted it so that it wouldn't be obvious that it's your car. And so Frank's like, okay, well, if it's painted, then there will be a yellow layer of paint under this. I think it was like blue or whatever. Mm-hmm. So he takes his key and like scratches a little bit off, and it's not yellow underneath. And so he scratches a little bit more, and it's still not yellow underneath. So clearly this is not actually Chet's car. And so Smuff is like really upset about this. He's kind of annoyed at them because, of course, Chet is now refusing to pay him any money. And also Chet is upset because still we haven't found his car.
Yeah.
But anyway, we just go back to the house and then whatever. We flash to the next day, and Frank and Joe decide that they are going to take that gray wig that they found on the floor of the barn to all the different wig shops in town, because obviously any proprietor would instantly recognize any wig that they've ever sold and be able to tell you who they sold it to, especially if that person might be using the wig for nefarious purposes, right? But when we do this, all of the owners are absolutely certain that they have never seen this wig before. And also they haven't sold any red wigs recently either. So maybe this is a bust. Whatever. So with this dead end, they decide that they are going to come up with another plan. Here is where we have to bring everybody in Bayport in together. They're going to gather all of their friends, or at least all their male friends, to do a search. They're going to canvass the entire area of town. So Frank, Joe, Chet, Biff Hooper, Jerry Gilroy, Phil Cohen, and Tony Prito all gather at the Hardy house to search. And Fenton suggests, he's like, okay, since there are 7 of you, why don't you split up into pairs and each take like a quarter of the town, and we'll all meet back at the Hardy home for lunch or whatever.
Or no, they're going to meet at a park. Yeah,
that's true. Yes,
because Fenton wants to like investigate a specific park too, because I think people dump their vehicles there a lot.
Yes, thank you. So they like draw out the map, and Fenton's like, well, you guys still have an odd number, so what if I join you? And so I think Joe is going to team up with Chet, and then Fenton and Frank are going to go together. So they all split up, and then they decide that they're going to meet. Well, they'll go back to the house, get the picnic from Laura, because Laura's in charge of making our picnic, and then they will go to the park to have their lunch, and then continue the search after lunch. Okay, so we do this. They look around town. They don't really find anything. So we get our lunch. We go to the park. And then they're all having such a nice time that they decide to take a nap in the sun because it's just a really nice day, I guess. But Joe is too excited about this. He can't sleep. So he decides that he is just going to search while everybody else is resting. And he finds some like underbrush next to the park. There's like a little foresty area. So he kind of goes in to look around. And he doesn't find the car, but he finds Chet's tire. So he goes back to the rest of the group, wakes them all up, and brings them back to the tire. Chet does identify it as his tire, so they know that the thief must have tossed it into the woods here and then replaced it with that spare that he'd stolen from the garage or from the barn. So they search the area a little bit more, and they find that this kind of like leads to an old dirt road, and they follow that dirt road down a little bit more into the woods. And what is waiting for them there? Chet's car.
Woohoo!
Yay! Mystery solved, right? We're done? No, I'm kidding. But they, of course, they identify it as his, and Chet gets into it, and they drive back into town, and they announce their victory to Chief Collick and to Smuff, who is very salty over this. But it seems like everybody in town is a little bit distracted right now. They don't really seem to care about the car issue anymore, because it turns out that there has been a bigger crime in town. Someone has stolen from the Tower Mansion. And we get a little bit of backstory here. Apparently, Tower Mansion is one of the most famous buildings in Bayport, or the most like recognizable buildings in Bayport, I guess, because it is a massive castle-looking home that sits like on the top of this hill in Bayport. So from anywhere in town, basically, you can see this building. It was built by a retired military man whose name was Major Applegate, and it's still lived in by his descendants, who are Hurd Applegate and his sister Adelia. Hurd is in his 60s and seems to spend all of his time collecting rare stamps. And Adelia is...
Here we go.
Oh, gosh. Poor Adelia. We call her a maiden lady of uncertain years who dresses and acts very eccentrically. Great. Whatever. But these siblings live here together, and apparently the building has 2 towers, one of which is referred to as like the new tower, even though it is already like 60 years old at this point. And then there's also the old tower, which would have been like the original structure of the home. But anyway, we learn about this break-in, and then we head home, and we learn that Hurd Applegate, the owner of the Tower Mansion, has actually hired Fenton to investigate the case. Frank and Joe are very excited by this news, and they really want to help Fenton with it. So he tells them a little bit more of the details. The safe was broken into in the home, and about $40,000 worth of jewelry and securities, so I guess bearer bonds, were stolen. And the safe was opened by either someone who did it so smoothly that they're probably a professional, or it was just somebody who happened to already know the combination.
In today's money, that's a little bit less than $500,000.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. So I can understand why the Applegates would be a little upset over this loss. Yeah. So the next day, Frank and Joe go along with Fenton to the tower to investigate. They head over there, and they learn from Hurd Applegate that he suspects their caretaker, Henry Robinson, of the theft. He thinks this because Henry has been working for him long enough that he has actually seen both the Applegate siblings open the safe before, and therefore could have easily known or like seen him put in the code, so he would have known the code easily. Also, Robinson recently paid off a $900 debt. I don't know why your employer would know that business. That doesn't seem like something he would need to know, but he thinks that, oh, this guy is usually doesn't really have a lot of disposable income and now all of a sudden can pay off this debt out of nowhere. Can't really explain that unless he is the thief.
Which also, so that's a significantly different amount of money.
Right.
Like in today's money, that's like just under $10,000 or whatever. And so it's like, okay, they stole $500,000 from you and just paid off a $10,000 debt. And so that's why you think like one of these things is not like the other.
Right. Frank and Joe are kind of upset to hear this, though, because actually Henry Robinson is the father of one of their friends who we name him Slim. I don't know if Slim is a recurring character or not, but we meet Slim a few times in this story, and we're very fond of Slim, and we don't want him or his family to have any hardships, so they're very upset at the accusation against their friend's dad. And Fenton says that he is unable to find any physical evidence at the scene of the crime, so so they call in Robinson to get his side of the story.
Yeah. So Frank, Joe, and Slim, who has also come to Tower Mansion with his father, wait outside of like the room. I think it's like the library or something, while Mr. Robinson talks with Fenton and Hurd Applegate. But they can't help but overhear part of the conversation inside, I think probably because it gets a little bit heated. Hurd is actually accusing Mr. Robinson of stealing and citing the paid off debt as evidence. Mr. Robinson does actually admit to knowing the combination to the safe, which, God, dude, just keep your mouth shut. Like, but he's adamant that he did not steal from it and that he would never steal from it. He is not a thief. He will not say how he paid off his debt, though. And I think that's really kind of what does it in for him, which is kind of unfortunate. And I really want to talk about this later because this is crazy to me. Anyway, so this angers Hurd so much that he does call the police to have Mr. Robinson arrested, and they come and they do arrest him, which is like, this is also wild. Like, I do not understand this. And like, I know like today, this probably, hopefully wouldn't happen, like, because there's literally no evidence to arrest him or convict him or anything like that. But it really does seem like in this time and place, the police are literally like the enforcers of the rich. Like,
oh yeah.
They're like, he did it. That's him. That's the guy. Arrest him. They arrest him and they put him in jail. Like,
just on Applegate's word. That's
just on this guy's word. That's insane. So Slim is obviously really upset by this, and he now has to go home and tell his mom and sisters, which is also really awful. And his mom is disabled, and she like faints at the news of this. It's horrific. So the Hardy Boys are like really determined now to try to help Slim and his dad in any way because they don't want their friend and his family to be hurting like this. They soon have the thought that the car thief might have been the same person who burgled Tower Mansion, and they realize that they never actually searched Chet's car for any clues after they found it. So they go do that. They go to Chet's farm and they look at his car, and inside, what do they find, Kori?
Is it another wig?
It's another wig. They find a red wig. So they look at this wig and they also can't find anything significant about it, but they do run home and show Fenton. And upon entering Fenton's study, they actually find Slim again. Slim is there talking to him because Slim has remembered seeing a prowler at Tower Mansion on the night that the theft occurred. He and his family lived at Tower Mansion because his dad was the caretaker there, and so they all lived on the premises. But he can't remember what the man looks like, though. So, interesting. The next day, the Hardy Boys learn that Hurd Applegate actually dropped the charges against Mr. Robinson at Fenton's urging, and instead posted a reward for $1,000 to whoever has information leading to the arrest of the real thief. So this is at least good news for Slim's family. Of course, Frank and Joe want to win this reward money for themselves and their college funds. They're going to use it responsibly, everyone. Don't worry. So they are now kind of like in competition with Fenton to solve this case, which is really funny. And they do work together, but it's funny to think about. So they talk to Slim and hear that while his father is back home, he's obviously been dismissed from being the caretaker at Tower Mansion. And so they've had to move because remember, they lived there. So they moved to this cheap rental home in this quote unquote bad neighborhood or whatever. And Mr. Robinson now can't find any work because like all of town thinks he's this criminal, this thief. And Slim is actually really worried about this because he thinks he's going to have to quit school and to help provide for his family and get a job. And this is really sad for Slim because Slim actually really wanted to be an engineer and is really smart and was doing really well in school and wanted to like go on to get a degree. But now thinks that he won't be able to do that. Just like,
just because someone falsely accused his father.
Yes.
All of that, his entire future.
Gone. Crazy. And there's even more fuel to this fire, which we have got to talk about later.
Yeah.
Oh,
Gets worse.
Gosh, gets so much worse. Anyway, so the Hardy Boys decide to try to go back to where they found Chet's car to see if maybe the thief returned there to try to like retrieve the car. And if they left any clues there, like I think specifically they're looking for footprints. And they do end up finding some, but there's like no discernible tread. I think they even wonder if like the thief had like put on like socks over his shoes or something to disguise his footprints, which is funny.
So resourceful.
Yeah.
So they don't find any of his footprints, but they do find a coat and a hat. Okay. And somehow from the label on the coat and the hat, they determined that these must have been purchased in New York City. I don't know how you would know that.
There's a specific store label on it, and I guess it's just a store that they know is only in New York City.
Gosh, but then later we mention a thrift store. Okay, anyway. But they do check inside the hat, and we find red hairs. So obviously these must have been worn by the same person who was wearing the red wig, right? So we rush back to Fenton with these new muddy clothing articles we found on the ground, and we're like, okay, there's nothing more that we can glean from this. So Fenton says that he is actually flying to New York City the next morning, and he will check and see if he can learn anything while he is there. Back at school, though, the next day, Frank and Joe learn that Slim is officially leaving school for good because he has to go work at the supermarket, and it's really super sad. Frank and Joe are not happy to see him leave school, obviously, but Slim he's got a good attitude about it. He's like, don't you worry, in 50 years, I'll have worked my way up to CEO of the corporation.
Slim.
Sorry, Slim. This is horrible. After school, though, they go home and they learn from Laura that Fenton has asked them to come meet him in New York.
Oh, my God.
What a lovely little surprise, right? So she drives him to the airport. They fly out and meet him there. And he fills us in on everything that he has learned so far. So he was actually able to track down the wig maker. Again, unless there's a label, I don't know how you'd know where the wig came from.
I think he was just like going around to different wig places the same way that Frank and Joe were, and he just got lucky.
Yeah.
I think.
Fenton's records are so interesting too, because at the start, when they're first going to the wig stores, he pulls out his files. He's like, well, according to my records, there's exactly 3 places in town that even sell wigs, so you should start here. And like, why do you have a list?
He's portrayed as being like somewhat eccentric, I think.
Yeah.
Like he's got like apparently like these filing cabinets in his office, which has just like a ton of like random moderately helpful information that he's compiled like over the years or whatever. It really reminded me of do you remember the book The Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil Frankenmuller?
Yes.
Which I loved and was obsessed with. The concept of running away from home to go live in God, what museum was it?
It wasn't the Smithsonian.
It might have been the Smithsonian.
Was it? It might have been.
Anyway, yeah, it was like, oh, I want to do this. I want to go do it. Anyway.
They do portray him as very eccentric and like having all these very specific sets of knowledge, but it's not ever a bad thing. It's not thought of as weird. It's impressive, and it's a great skill that any good police officer would have.
Not the bad way that Adelia is portrayed as being eccentric, because she's portrayed as being eccentric to the point where no one wants to marry her. And so therefore she is not worth anything. So.
Right. And her clothes are really colorful. Ew. That's actually how they talk about her.
She dresses poorly.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's like 3 different uncoordinating colors going on in her outfit. What an unmarriable hag.
If all it took for me to be quote unquote unmarriable was wearing weird colors, I am wearing the weirdest colors in the book. Watch me with my lime green and magenta like combined. I'm gonna look like Barney walking down the street.
You could pull it off. Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
I want to make a meme that says #make it work with Tim Gunn, and then just Barney in Barney's costume. Anyway.
Gosh. Okay, so we have our wig database that we're going through. we find a store that makes wigs mainly for like theatrical productions, right? And so Fenton asks if they remember making any red wig, like the one that they have, right? And the proprietor tells us, oh yeah, I actually, I've got this one actor who's really, really like specific about what he wants. And so whenever I make a wig, like I remember because I have to put so much effort into it. And he says that actually the person who ordered this specific wig was an actor named Morley, who is currently appearing in a run of Merchant of Venice at a local production. But it doesn't really make sense that Morley would be our suspect, this actor guy, because he has been, he's been in this production and the production has been running for 3 weeks. And the production schedule, like it would not be possible for this man to be at a production of Phantom of Venice, but also have time to get to Bayport, commit these crimes, stay in town for a few days, randomly wrecking cars, and then get back in time for his next show. Like it just wouldn't be logistically possible. But anyway, they actually get to go see the show, and Frank, Joe, and Fenton all go speak with him in his dressing room. And he tells them, actually, the wig that the proprietor of the wig store made recently is actually his second wig because the first one was stolen about a month ago. Actually, while he was performing, someone broke into his dressing room, stole the wig and his watch and some jewelry that he had in the room as well. So... very interesting. We also are able to track down the store where the hat and coat came from. Nothing comes from this because I think this is when the person at the proprietor of this store is like, oh, they probably just got it from a thrift store or something.
Yeah, they were just like, it's too old. Like the styles are too old. We haven't sold them recently. And so we have no idea to know who could have bought them. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not possible that someone just still has an article of clothing that they bought 3 years ago,
No, it is, but like I think that they wouldn't have a way to know. Like,
of course,
like they wouldn't remember someone from 3 years ago.
I don't think anyone would remember any customer. Period.
Seriously,
like, if you were here this morning, I might remember you. Probably not, but like, geez. Anyway, but yeah, so that's a dead end. We don't learn anything from the hat or the coat. So Fenton takes the boys to the police station to look through records of known criminals in this area who use disguises. Because, again, this is something that we have easily at our disposal. Fenton can walk into the police station in New York City and just go through their records there because he's so famous and so revered everywhere he goes. This is something that they actually do in the CW show as well, where... really? Ace's dad, the police officer, is not any longer on the force, but he has just free reign to just go in and help out whenever. And sometimes he'll even be the arresting officer in some cases that he's just like temporarily back on the force for that hour. Because they just needed an actor to go in and play that role. And McGinnis already left the show in season 1, after season 1, or at the end of season 1, McGinnis leaves. And so they just randomly have Ace's dad just sometimes have access and sometimes he's not on the force and sometimes it's just so funny. It reminded me of that.
Well, it's so funny too because like they actually, whenever they're talking, I forgot to put this in, but whenever they were talking to the actor Morley or whatever, Fenton introduces himself and Morley's like, oh yeah, I've heard the name Fenton Hardy. And I'm like, you have? Like, what? You're just like some actor in New York. You know the name of this random like New York police detective? That's crazy.
I couldn't name a single famous police officer.
I couldn't
in real life.
I couldn't tell you the name of a police officer I've met.
Yeah,
like
I couldn't tell you the name of the police chief of our own town. Like,
no, me neither. And I live in a much smaller town than you.
Yeah.
Actually, our town doesn't have a police force. I don't know what I'm talking about. There's one in a nearby town.
Okay. See, yeah, like this just is not a thing.
I've met that guy because I had to go get fingerprinted for background check. Doesn't matter. But like, and I couldn't tell you his name.
That's okay. That is okay. It's just so ridiculous to me. It's just so funny. I think this is hilarious. But yeah, the New York City Police Department just happens to have a stack of files ready to go of a list of every known criminal who uses disguises.
Cool.
Okay, so we go down our list here that we're given, and we look for a man who generally fits the description of the guy that Slim says he saw at the Tower Mansion, and then narrow that list down even further by anyone who already has an alibi.
This is crazy, though, to me, because Slim literally says that he doesn't remember what the guy looks like. So they're not narrowing it down. They're literally looking at every single known criminal and just like crossing out people who have alibis. But it's like, how
are you checking all of these alibis?
You're in New York City. You're in New York City. How the F are you? First of all, how long is that list? Second of all, how are you crossing off alibis? How are you following up on alibis? This only takes them, this is like an evening. This would take you months.
Yeah, we're only in New York for a day and a half.
This would take you months.
Yeah.
Months. And I know the population of New York City is much higher today than it was in 1959.
But still.
It's still pretty freaking big.
It still would have been one of the largest crime areas in the world.
Yes. Easily. Anyway, sorry, continue.
But yeah, luckily, after all this narrowing down, we are left with just one man. So process of elimination, right? This man is John Jackley, who, because of his proclivities for red wigs, is known by Red Jackley. And he is a known criminal who is extremely dangerous, apparently, but he recently got out on parole, meaning that he does not have an alibi. So Fenton sends the Hardy Boys home because he says that they've been gone from home for too long anyway, and he needs to just follow up on this himself. So he goes home, and Fenton is going to stay in New York to look into things a little bit more. But then the next day, he still doesn't come home. And then they go to school, and then they come home, and he's still not home, and they haven't heard from him. So we start to get pretty worried about where Fenton is.
Yeah. So we end up waiting like a whole other day. So I think it's like 2 full days or maybe 3 almost that Fenton is gone and we don't hear from him. But he finally gets home, and he tells the boys that he ended up tracking down Red Jackley at a boarding house, and that he went undercover as a fellow criminal to like try to like get close to him.
All right, Fenton.
I love this. But unfortunately, like soon after, Red Jackley like got involved in another jewelry heist like in the city, and then had to like flee town, which led to like this massive statewide chase that Fenton had to like break cover to join. So apparently also Red Jackley used to work for the railroad very near to Bayport, actually. And so he like used the railroad to try to escape. He like stole a hand car and I guess hopped on the rails and started
just going down the road.
Down the railroad. I don't know. But then he ended up like going so fast around a turn, I guess because the cops were like literally chasing him. I'm very confused as to how this whole thing happened.
That's how I read it, is that it was like a chase accident.
Yeah, and he goes around this corner so fast that he ends up crashing the handcart and getting seriously injured, and he's taken to a hospital in Albany where he is right now and currently unconscious. So Fenton wasn't actually able to learn anything about Red Jackley's involvement in any thefts here in Bayport, and he's just like waiting for a call from the doctor hopefully for him to wake up so that he can go and interview him about the stuff that's been happening here in town. So after telling the boys all of this, Oscar Smuff ends up showing up at the Hardy home, and he asks if he and Fenton can kind of join forces to try to get this $1,000 reward together and split it. And Fenton is instantly annoyed by this and just turns Smuff down flat. But Smuff ends up bringing up Jackley, which surprises Fenton because he didn't know that the news of Jackley's capture made it all the way to Bayport. But Smuff says that he's going to go try to wait by Jackley's bedside bedside, essentially for him to wake up so that he can question him. And then Smuff leaves. So Fenton is obviously enormously peeved at this point because he knows that Smuff is going to just bungle this interview and that it's going to ruin the case. And so he has to try to get there first, especially because he does get a call from the doctor at that point that Jackley likely will not survive the night. So good night. So Smuff says he's going to be, or said that he was going to be taking the 6 o'clock plane, and that is the soonest plane to Albany, I guess. And so Fenton has to try to, I guess, get on that one too, and hopes that he's just going to somehow be able to get there before Smuff and interview Jackley first. So Frank and Joe have this idea that they are going to gather their friends and plot to try to delay Smuff so that he misses the 6 o'clock plane so that Fenton can get there first. Frank and Joe apparently occasionally work evenings in this grocery store nearby, or I guess it's not a grocery store, it's like a fruit store, specifically fruit seller.
Just a fruit store, yep.
Yeah. And that's really close to where Smuff lives. So they and all of their friends go over there and, like, in succession, try to delay Smuff just with, like, conversation. Like, one of them goes up to him and, like, talks to him, and then another one goes up to him and talks to him. And then Frank and Joe set a fire in the back of the fruit store. So really, the owner did ask Frank and Joe to burn some trash in the back alley, which is, I guess, what they're doing. But I think they make the fire, like, intentionally larger than he asked them to. So, and then they pretend that, like, the store is on fire to try to trick Smuff into, like, going over to help them extinguish it, which he does. And Smuff does see the fire, and he extinguishes the fire and is, like, really prideful about the whole thing. And he's like, oh, I'm going to be like this town hero, and maybe this is going to be enough to earn me a spot on the police force finally and everything. But then he quickly realizes that he has missed his flight, and so he has to wait for the next one. So the next day, Fenton comes back from Albany, and he tells the boys that he did manage to question Jackley before he died without Smuff being present. And apparently, Jackley confessed to everything. He says, yes, he came into town, stole a car that he crashed, and then he stole Chet's car, and then he abandoned it after he tried to rob the ferry office. And then he broke into Tower Mansion and stole everything from the safe. So pretty much just responsible for every single crime that has happened in Bayport in the past week. But as far as where the jewelry is now, all he managed to say before he loses consciousness is that he didn't dare try to sell them and instead hid the jewels in the quote-unquote old tower. So, as you said before, Kori, the Tower Mansion has 2 towers, one new tower and one old one. And so they think, oh, he must mean that he stashed the loot in the older tower at the mansion. So Fenton basically hands the case over to the boys at this point so that they can go to search this old tower and claim the $1,000 reward.
I just have to say, I was so shocked that they let this guy die. The writers, not that the parties let him die, but just like that a death even occurred in this story. Mm-hmm. Other than like Asa Sidney, who was really elderly at the time of his death, or like past tense deaths, like, oh, Dirk Valentine died 100 years ago. We don't have that in Nancy Drew. Like, suspects don't just die or get killed in the process of a pursuit. Like, we don't have deaths like that. It just doesn't happen. And so I was just shocked that it would get that dark, honestly.
I think it's a little bit different because the death happens kind of off page, like off screen, essentially. Like, we're not there when it happens. We only learn about it after the fact from Fenton.
Still, though.
But still, yeah.
To have a suspect die? That's crazy.
Yeah. I think the closest that we ever get to kind of near deaths in Nancy Drew is like if it's happened before the story starts, right? And the events are kind of in, respect to that death.
Like Josiah Crowley, who's already dead before the book starts, which it's not sad in that case because it's just an old man who's already been dead. Mm-hmm. Or Asa Sidney, oh, he had a good long life. He was 100. Right. Or Dirk Valentine, it doesn't matter anymore because it was so long ago, like things like that. It's just so unusual to me. We never.
Well, isn't in the Haunted Carousel? I'm trying to think about the criminal. It's not
Well, but that is a digest, though.
That's
if we're
true.
talking just
That's
original
true.
56, it just doesn't happen. Obviously, there's other examples later in the series where we have murders or something does happen to a victim or, things like that. But never just having a suspect die as a result of a police pursuit. Oh my gosh. It's just so gruesome,
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, again, Kori, it's a book for boys.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that that's the reason. I think that that's the whole difference. Girls can't handle gross murders,
That's what they think. Yeah.
Well,
so
exactly.
they don't write it in there. Yeah, I know.
I don't agree with that.
I'm just making that clear for our listeners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to think of the attitude that the authors must have had at the time. It's just so interesting that that's where the line is, that death is okay for boys, but it's not okay for girls, Anyway, so yes, we rush over to Tower Mansion and they ask Herd Applegate if they can look around. And he is very grumpy. He almost doesn't let them do it, but he does agree to let them search the old tower. He and Adelia are both very adamant, you're not going to find anything up there. It's not even worth looking. But they do start looking around and actually do not find anything. They do find, though, that the tower has this trap door that leads up into a separate room, and then from there you can get on the roof. So they even get out and look on the roof to see if any clues were left there. But they actually break the trap door to the roof in the process of doing this. So yeah, and Joe falls over the railing for the stairs. It's very nerve-wracking, but they're okay. But ultimately they don't find anything in this old tower, right? So they're well, the new tower is still pretty old. Even that was built 60 years ago or whatever. So it's possible that the bad guy just got confused and thought that the new tower was the old tower. So what if we look through the new tower as well? So they go ask if Herd will let them search the new tower. And he's like, you guys are just pulling my leg here. You're trying to make a fool of me. Absolutely not. Get out. And they're certain that he's just going to scold them about breaking his trap door as well, right? So at this point, Frank decides, okay, well, if it takes this to convince him, we will tell him the real reason that we are searching. And that is that they have a lead on the real culprit. Yeah, I don't understand why they didn't start with this because, again, this is basically your client. You would think you would want to fill them in on the developments of the mystery so that they have enough available to them to make decisions like this. But basically he tells them, we're pretty sure it was not Slim's dad. We think that it was this other guy named Red Jackley. And Herd is so excited over this new lead that they have that he agrees not only to let them search, but he is also going to help them search the new tower. And he's also in a really good mood about the broken trapdoor. He's like, I'll fix it. No problem. You figuring all this out for me. Thank you so much. It's kind of funny. But they look through, and they don't find anything in the new tower either. And Herd starts to get pretty annoyed at them at this point again. And so they end up leaving. They go home, and they tell Fenton about all of this, who is really surprised. He's like, I think it's got to still be there. It wouldn't make sense. Jackley had absolutely no incentive to lie about this, especially if he's on his deathbed. It just doesn't make sense that it wouldn't be there. So he plans that he and the Hardy Boys are going to go back and talk to Herd again to look again. Only the problem is, at this point, though, that word has gotten out about Red Jackley and the fact that the jewels have not been found yet. And so people, especially Herd Applegate, are starting to think that actually Slim's dad was just in league with Jackley and that it was them working together to pull off this act.
Oh my gosh.
So that evening, regardless, Fenton, Frank, and Joe all go back to the Applegate mansion and convince them to look around some more, and they still do not find anything. And at this point, it's really dark outside, so they plan that they're going to come back first thing at dawn and start looking around a little bit more because they think that maybe the outside gardens could have some more information or some more clues on the actual grounds rather than inside the towers. So they do. They come back at dawn the next day, and they actually bring their shovels with them, and they start digging through the garden beds. And Frank actually finds a buried chest. So they open the chest, all excited, because they're certain that it's in here, right? All the stolen treasure. No, it's flower bulbs.
What?
Apparently, Mr. Robinson really, really loves gardening. And I guess the Applegates weren't really keen on allowing him to do a lot of gardening on their properties. So, in an effort to make sure that the flower bulbs had a cool, dry storage place, he buried them underground because he really didn't have any other options, I guess. We dig around some more. We find another chest, but it just has seeds in it.
Yes.
So yeah, whatever. Apparently, Hurd tells us, though, that actually Mr. Robinson, Slim's dad, had been wanting to build a greenhouse so that he would have places to store all of his flower bulbs and seeds, but Hurd was not keen on the idea, so they did not build the greenhouse. Whatever, though, they don't find anything else on the property, and anyway, it's time for school now, so Frank and Joe head to school. But when they get to school, we learn from our friends that Mr. Robinson has been arrested again. Apparently, Chief Colleague believes Applegate's theory that Jackley and Mr. Robinson were accomplices. And so because of this theory, or this rumor going around, Colleague has arrested Mr. Robinson again.
This is insane. If a rumor is all that it takes for you to get arrested, like we would be in such a terrible state.
Yeah, so obviously Frank and Joe feel really bad about this, and they know that the only way that they can help Slim and his dad is by finding the stolen jewels, so they become more determined than ever to solve this case. So after school, they start wondering, all right, let's look at this from a totally new angle. Maybe our theories are all off. Maybe because Jackley used to work a lot in this area, maybe he is misremembering. Because he's just committed so many crimes that he just remembers having hidden something here, but actually it's a different crime or something, a different heist. So maybe he's just conflating the two things. Maybe the Applegates did it themselves and are blaming everyone else to throw suspicion off. And maybe it's just all like insurance fraud, right? That they've just hidden the jewels elsewhere in their own home so that they can get the cash from the insurance company. The poor defenseless insurance company. We have to take a second to feel bad for them about this. But we make a plan. We're going to actually head over to Tower Mansion and try to like snoop on the Applegates, not from inside, but just like from outside, stake out the building to see if we can learn anything, if we see anything weird going on.
The way I thought, Kori, that we have finally solved it.
I started to see it as well because of how much time Hurd and Adelia were like, you won't find anything.
Yes.
There's nothing up there. They were so adamant. I was like, maybe they're onto something here.
Well, and like at this point, we're in chapter 17. And so I'm like, okay, we have just enough time for our thrilling conclusion and for our wrap up here. Yeah. So I was like, this has got to be it. Yeah. This has got to be it. They've got to be committing insurance fraud. And love that because we hate Hurd Applegate. He's horrible.
I was so ready for him to be the culprit.
Yes. But anyway, so yes, so they go and stake out Tower Mansion. They're like hiding behind a tree. This is the scene on the cover of the books. And they see a flashlight moving around in the tower. They actually it almost passes over them, so they have to jump out of the way. But before they can decide whether or not they're going to try to get closer to see who it might be in the tower, a guard dog runs over and traps them, and Hurd comes out. But again, he's like, oh, it's just you must be here to do more searching. So he doesn't suspect them of being there to investigate them. And when the boys ask him about who's in the tower with the flashlight, he says, oh, that's just my sister Adelia. She thought she would do another search herself. Okay.
I thought she was certain there was nothing up there. Okay.
But so the Hardy Boys head home discouraged about this, and they tell Fenton, and Fenton kind of laughs at them about it. He's like, no, I don't think that's what's happening here.
Rich people would never do something untoward. Trust me.
I don't think that
could never be that.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm sorry. I still think that's the case at this point. But it's not. So the next day, Frank and Joe hop on their motorcycles to try to learn more information about Jackley by talking to someone at the railroad where Jackley used to work. They end up talking to the station master at this station a little ways outside of Bayport, and he remembers Jackley, but he doesn't really know anything else. They stop for a picnic lunch to kind of regroup and eat because they're starving. Also, I just have to talk about this for a second because this specific lunch scene they talk about eating deviled eggs. And like at this point in the day, they had already driven to like another station, and then they get to this station. So it's been like a full morning, and they got this lunch from their mom at home in the morning. And just think about a stinky, hot deviled egg on the back of a motorcycle in like what I'm imagining is early fall.
Yeah.
Ew. And then also they spell cookie with a Y.
Yeah, that was weird.
Anyway,
I feel like I've noticed that in another Nancy Drew book at some point. I think that's just Harriet's thing.
Did
it's
they
just
used
a
to
quirk
spell
of hers.
cookie with a Y?
Harriet did, apparently, at the
Anyway.
very least. But
Whatever. I just had to talk about that because I could not stop gagging thinking about eating a hot deviled egg off of the back of a motorcycle.
after the cookies. They eat the cookies first and then have the egg as a dessert.
Oh, like don't get me wrong, I love deviled eggs. I love deviled eggs. I love deviled eggs fresh from the refrigerator. Okay?
Yeah.
I don't want them. I don't even want them after they've been sitting on like a buffet cookout table all night. You know what I mean? And it's only been like 2 hours after the sun has gone down. I don't want them even then.
You mean
If
you
they're
don't
not
want it in like an
cold-
old butter Tupperware container?
If they're not cold, I'm not eating them. That's how that's going.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so they are eating this picnic lunch, and they just kind of are like looking around at the train station, and they notice 2 water towers at this train station. One of them's kind of newer looking, and then one of them is kind of like all rusted and old. And so they kind of both independently have this thought, like, maybe Jackley wasn't talking about the old tower at Tower Mansion. Maybe because he's thinking about his old workplace where he would be really familiar, and he likes to ride the trains to like escape and like flee. Maybe he came this way and is talking about the old water tower at his former place of employment. Oh,
Genius.
So they start rushing over to this water tower, and they end up getting stopped by Smuff, who has followed them here. And he doesn't actually catch on to what they're doing, thankfully, but he's here asking them if they want to team up. I don't know if this is, again, like, or if it's like separate and he wants to team up with them instead of Fenton. Whatever. But Frank basically says, we'll get back to you. And Smuff leaves. So the boys run and they climb up this very dilapidated water tower, which is actually like super kind of dangerous and sketchy because they're like climbing this ladder and like rungs keep like breaking off because they're so rusted. But they manage to make it up into the tower, and they like open the trap door and they start looking around, and there's no water in here anymore, obviously. It's just like tons of junk. There's like old tires and like pieces of wood, and like I think there's like a couch in there or something. Like it's just a lot of like old junk.
There's a pile of crowbars in the corner.
Yes, yeah. And eventually they end up finding a sack under some piles of lumber, and inside is the stolen jewelry and the bonds from Tower Mansion. So just as they are like, oh my God, yes, we found it. Let's get back into town. Let's go back on our motorcycles and bring this back. They end up getting stopped by a man who introduces himself as, quote unquote, Hobo Johnny. He's like standing in the doorway and will not let them leave. He says that this water tower is his room and that the boys don't have any right to the stuff inside of it. And he's actually grateful to them for finding the valuables, but he'll be taking them now, basically. And when Frank and Joe kind of take exception to this, Johnny locks them into the water tower.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Gosh, okay, this gets so scary so quick.
Yes.
So they are like barring the door so he does not try to like force his way in or whatever. And he's like, you know what? That's totally fine. I'm in no hurry. If you guys are locked in, I'll just come back in a few days when you're dead and just take the jewels from you then. So I'm going to go now, and I'll probably be back in like an hour or whatever. But you guys hang tight. Yeah. And so Frank and Joe are obviously like, okay, well, what's going to come first? Suffocation or starvation? Because that's pretty bleak, right? Yeah, Johnny, I think he also mentions that he's going to go get some of his buddies to, I guess, help him or whatever. But so he go, and Frank and Joe are like, okay, well, if he says he's going to be gone for like an hour, this is our perfect time to make a break for it. They use this opportunity to bust down the door of the water tower, and it's not difficult because everything is so dilapidated anyway. And they're able to quickly jump back on their motorcycles, race back into town, and get home no problem. They deliver the news to Fenton, who is, of course, very proud of them. He arranges to meet the Applegates and Mr. Robinson. They are going to have one of those very classic scenes at the end where we all meet up and the Hardy Boys are going to do our big reveal to everyone. So we head over to Tower Mansion and everybody is here. The Applegates are here. The entire Robinson family is here. Chet is here. Oscar Smuff shows up.
Yes.
We only invite him so that Frank and Joe can like have a moment to hold it over him that they won. They don't even tell him like, hey, mystery's solved. They just invite him here
For a
under like
surprise.
false pretenses for a surprise.
Yes.
Yeah. And then it's going to be like, oh, by the way, that money you really wanted, it's ours. Yeah. Great. So they explain to everyone that they found the treasure, and Herd Applegate gives them each a $500 check, and Smuff gets really annoyed. And we do finally learn why Mr. Robinson refused to explain that $900 debt that he paid off. Adelia Applegate just gave him the money. Apparently, she didn't tell Herd because she knew that if she told Herd wouldn't have allowed it. And so she just did it behind his back.
No.
And promised Mr. Robinson that he made him swear to secrecy so that she wouldn't get in trouble with her brother, who apparently controls the purse strings.
No. Because I'm sorry. Excuse me. So this whole family, the whole reason why Robinson was arrested in the first place was because he wouldn't tell Herd how he paid off his debt, because his sister is the one who gave him the money. And so his sister could have anytime been like, oh, no, Herd, back off Mr. Robinson. He didn't steal it. I gave him the money, but she doesn't.
She chooses to let him go to prison or jail instead.
Twice, by the way. Twice. Not just once. And then she doesn't try to like fix her mistake or it's too late because he's already released. No. Twice. He gets arrested twice. He's literally been in prison for like a week. And it's like, oh, I'm just not going to say anything because I don't want my brother to not approve of what in the white lady bullshit. I was aghast. The gall of this woman.
Yeah.
The cojones. The audacity.
She'll find it in her heart to loan $900 because the family is financially struggling. But when they lose their home, she won't even set the record straight. Okay. All right, Adelia. You know what?
And okay, like props to Mr. Robinson or whatever, I guess, for not like, breaking the secret because she told him not to. But like, aren't you super mad?
I would be.
Well, I at the moment I get arrested, I'm telling. I'm being like, actually, Chief Colleague, I didn't want to say this to Herd Applegate because, like it's a delicate situation, but his sister actually gave me the money. Maybe you should go talk to her, like without her being present.
Done.
And then it's over.
Yeah.
Like, anyway, sorry.
Well, and it gets even better, right? Because Herd turns around, realizes what he's done here, and offers Mr. Robinson his job back and is like, if you come back, I'll give you a livable wage this time. And also I'll build you that greenhouse you wanted.
No.
And he's just like very happy to accept. I'd be like, I'm never speaking to this family again the way that you treated me. Write me a letter of recommendation and I'll be on my way.
Yes.
Bye.
I would have moved out of this town.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry to Slim. Like, you can finish school. If you're so bright, you can finish school at another high school because we are out of here.
We're starting over. We're not dealing with a town that would treat us this way.
Seriously, because it's not just, Herd is horrible. But, like, let's not forget, Chief Colleague just arrested him for no reason twice. And then everybody else in town was so convinced that like, oh yeah, he must be a criminal, that they wouldn't give him a job. So it's not just Herd, it's not just Chief Colleague either. Literally everybody thinks that you were a criminal, and like just because now the rich guy says you're not, you're gonna like be fine.
And go back to work for him.
No, couldn't be me. Couldn't be me.
I would be like, well, if you get a new safe and change the combination, maybe I'll consider it. First of all, I'm not going to have you accusing me again.
Yeah, or how about I never step foot in this house again?
Yeah. How about a settlement where you pay me for damages?
To my lost income, to my lost reputation. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I will be taking half of that, $500,000.
Yeah, seriously.
Oh.
Okay. But Frank and Joe are thrilled with themselves because, everything is right with the Robinson family supposedly now, and they are getting this money for college, but they can't help themselves. They do have to take a little portion for themselves now because they want to build a crime lab in the Hardy barn. For their future cases. Because, by the way, this is like canonically their first ever case. And so the whole time we're like, what if we could solve a case? Then we would be just like Dad. And so now we're going to use our money to like further that and have a lab where we can do more mystery solving.
I will say, I think that this is a really great little introduction. And the whole like concept, of them like building a crime lab like on the second floor of their garage. I was like, oh my God. Headquarters. I was so excited. I was like, I want to read more of them like having little mysteries out of the top of their barn. Like, that's so fun.
ATAC is already starting.
I'm just saying. I get it. I get why these are so popular. I get why we have so many of them, and then why Edward Stradmeyer was like, those did really well. What if I wrote some specifically for girls? Like, I get it. I get it. Anyway, okay. A couple things. Joe is kind of hilarious still, even in this
Always.
one. I did say before that I don't think they have any personality, and that is still true. I think there is maybe like a slight mischievousness to them.
Yeah.
Like with the whole like Smuff storyline and them like trying to like delay him in his flight. There's kind of that. And I do think Fenton kind of encourages it a little bit without being directly involved. Yeah. But there is also a moment where right after they meet with Callie, like on the street after she's just dropped her cake or whatever. And Joe, like, cause she said she made the cake for a neighbor who was like recovering from an illness. And Joe is like, oh, Callie, I think I'm starting to feel a little sick.
Where's my cake, Callie? I thought that was so funny. Yes.
So funny. And just like so typically Joe. So like it starts early is all I'm saying. It starts early. I really hope that that's from the original text because
I hope so.
That's so cute.
I would have been disappointed if Joe wasn't the funny brother anyway. Like it had to have started somewhere. It needed to be from the beginning.
And then something else about kind of like the dynamic between them was mostly, that Frank, I feel like, is sometimes a little bit patronizing to Joe. And like sometimes Joe can kind of, I think, jump to a conclusion. And like Frank will either choose to like follow him down the road or not. But then one thing I did think was like really sweet though is when they're trapped in the water tower, Joe starts like panicking. He starts like freaking out, and Frank like comforts him, and he's like, "It's gonna be okay. Like we're gonna figure it out. Like don't worry." And it was just like a sweet like older brother younger brother moment. I was like, "Oh my God, they're taking care of each other." I love it.
They do have a great dynamic. They really do. They're Hardy Boys.
Our Hardy Boys. I know. Honestly, it was just so like straightforward. I think that's the thing that kind of struck me about it the most is like the way the mystery was structured. It seemed like, oh, this is like real. Like the crime that occurred and everything. I mean, maybe not like the whole getting escaping on the railroads part of it, but like the whole like concept of like, okay, so there were a ton of like these little crime things that happened and then a big crime thing that happened, and then we investigate, we hit a dead end, we investigate, we hit a dead end, we investigate, we hit a dead end, we investigate, we find something, we solve it, we crack the case, that's it. I think that's pretty typical for how like actual crime investigation goes, because it's like when I think about like true crime that I watch or whatever, it's like we try all of these avenues where we don't get anything, we don't find anything until we find the one thing that is it, and then the whole thing breaks wide open. Whereas I feel like, and so I loved that about this, in that it felt like it was portraying like real, actual like detective work and the way that cases like actually go. Whereas in Nancy Drew books, I do feel like a lot of the time it's like a clue leads to another clue that leads to another clue that leads to another clue, which helps Nancy solve it, but we still don't really understand what happened until Nancy explains it to us. Whereas that's not what this was, you know? It's like we're just following these leads and we're not getting any information until finally we get the information. We understand the whole thing.
Yeah, you're there along with them. Where Nancy, it's a surprise for us at the end reveal as well sometimes.
Because it's so convoluted, because it's not straightforward, because it's not just about one detail. It's about, I don't know. I couldn't tell you, I guess. It's about something else. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that does track. Yeah. Some of it, I did feel like the pacing was a little slow, but it's not realistic. So, yeah.
Totally. I think the thing I loved the most about this book, though, was, this is going to sound silly, but like just like the vibe. It was like not just small town, but like it felt like it was just like a group of friends solving a mystery. Yeah. And I think like if you've watched the CW Hardy Boys show, that's the exact same vibe. It's like, because it's not just Frank and Joe like you were talking about before. It's Frank and Joe and Callie, Chet, and we even mentioned Biff, and we mentioned Tony, and so it's like, and Slim, and so it's like we have all of this big cast of characters in this small town. We all see enough of them to where it really feels like, okay, we're all friends, like we're all doing stuff together, like they go have dinner. There's a couple times where like Frank and Callie go like take food to the Robinsons, like stuff like that, where it's like, okay, like real life is happening. They're going to school, like, you know, they're doing all of this stuff that like normal like teens like did at that time. And it all feels very age appropriate and like a little bit of a slice of life kind of a crime.
Definitely.
Whereas I think Nancy sometimes can be a little bit more outlandish, a little bit more like I'm reading fantasy.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Yeah.
But I loved that. Not that I don't love that sometimes, right? I love when Nancy, like when sometimes it is ridiculous and sometimes Nancy seems like a superhero. The things she does couldn't happen, right? That's part of the charm of those, just marking a difference. But I loved how it just felt so, like just like camaraderie, like, let's do the stuff and like be kids and like have fun. And that's what it felt like reading it, you know?
It definitely feels more in line with what is at least my perception of other Stratemeyer books, that it's more of like, we're just a good old group of friends who like to chill out and be chums and get into hijinks or whatever. But this time it's a mystery, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I feel like there was a lot more of that with the earlier books. Like I feel like Rover Boys was like, okay, we're a group of friends. We're brothers, but also we've got all of our friends. And that's what the story is really about. Just like our day-to-day stuff that we get up to. But then with Nancy, it has to change. That, now she's the superstar. And there's the story. Yeah.
It's just so much more individualistic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And she has her friends, but it never feels like it's not about the time and place. It's not about Nancy's friend group. It's not about anything like that. It's about the mystery. And it's much more cerebral and like trying to figure out what's going on and using really Nancy as a vehicle to do that instead of like Nancy being the one figuring out what's going on. Right. You know? Yeah. Which is why I think a lot of the times we don't get her actually doing real investigative work, because that's not really what we're writing about. Right. We're not writing about Nancy necessarily as a detective. We're really writing about the mystery itself and like what's a cool thing we can do in a mystery. What's a twist that nobody's going to see coming, or I guess kids won't see coming because a lot of them you probably see coming. But And so it's less about, and that's why Nancy can be so much more superhero like, right? Is because it's like, well, we need someone to figure it out, and it's got to be Nancy. And so even if it's impossible, even if it's this impossible mystery, we have to figure out some way for Nancy to solve it,
Right.
which means sometimes she's going to have to do things that don't seem realistic, don't seem possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I could totally, after reading this, I can imagine the Hardy Boys' day-to-day life if they don't have a mystery currently. I can't with Nancy.
Yes.
I don't know what her life looks like if there's not a mystery going on. I imagine she's just like sitting in silence in her room waiting for something to
Rocking
happen.
back and forth manically.
Best, please call with something strange that happened today. Please, I need something to do.
I need to find a secret passage.
Yes.
I need to compare forgeries. I need to.
But she just doesn't have anything else going on because the point of her stories is not, oh, this is what I'm doing and this falls on my lap. And it's the whole point is that I'm going to solve this mystery anyway. And anything else that I have going on is going to fall by the wayside. What dance? I've forgotten about it already. You know?
Yeah. That's so interesting too, because I think about like, right, we were talking about the Tower Treasure is the first one. So we wonder like how it changes, you know, through the rest of them for the Hardy Boys. Like, what is it? Does it feel the same as this? Because I think about Nancy Drew, and Secret of the Old Clock is way different.
Yeah.
You know, and I still can't quite see what Nancy's life is like without the mystery in Secret of the Old Clock. But I think I can see it more than I can see it in other ones.
Yeah.
And so maybe it does change a little bit for the Hardy Boys. Maybe their life really does just become about solving mysteries. But I'd be curious to see if Frank ever graduates high school. If there's any like time progression, you know. I guess probably not. If you're thinking about like the original texts, like if they were 15, 16,
they probably stay those ages.
They would just stay those ages.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, and so if school is still like a real part or something they really have to work around, then yeah, I mean, we can see what it would be like.
Yeah.
But for Nancy, it's like, she's not dating anyone. She's not like, she runs errands for her father. So like, if she doesn't have a mystery, I'm sure she's still doing that for Carson, but like.
Or helping Hannah. You know, that's probably
helping Hannah do what? Hannah's got it. You know what I mean?
She gardens sometimes.
That's true. She gardens. Yeah. Maybe she gardens.
Or she'll run errands for Hannah as well. Like she might run to the store for Hannah or deliver something for Carson. But like
boring. She's not working towards anything.
No. She doesn't need to.
Oh my gosh.
She just needs to wait until she's old enough and a man will take over her care, right?
Crazy. Yeah, it's because like Frank and Joe are so clearly working towards a goal of them being detectives. Like that's what they want to do. And Nancy doesn't even do that. She can't do that.
Nancy just wants to fill her time. Poor Nancy.
It's wild, right?
Not even allowed to go to school. Like she spends all of her time, running charity errands for neighbors that don't have any food? Like,
yeah.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Babysitting small children.
She organized like that flower show in
Larkspur Lane.
Larkspur Lane. Yeah.
Poor Nancy.
Wow.
It's so see, I appreciate her so much more now.
Yes,
because I understand more of this perspective that she's coming from.
Yeah, because it's like, if all I was supposed to do was twiddle my freaking thumbs and wait for some boy to propose to me, I would go insane. I would be just as single-minded as Nancy.
Yeah.
And be like, forget about that dance. I'm not going to that dance. Like, whatever's will is missing. Like, we gotta find that.
I've seen what happened to Helen. I'm not doing that. Like,
yeah, that's so true. Because we rag on Nancy all the time for kind of being a bad friend or like, being too focused on the mystery that she's not necessarily paying attention to other things that are going on. But it's like, if the option is I pay attention to probably like, imagine the dating pool in River Heights.
Oh. Like it's Buck Rodman or it's Ned, Nancy. Those are your options.
Like if my choices are to go out on another date with Ned Nickerson where he talks about his football and I have to sit there and listen and pretend to be interested, or F off entirely and go drive to a neighboring town where I save a small child from drowning. Of course I'm going to go do that.
Yeah, that sounds way more exciting. Oh my gosh.
So
I appreciate Nancy.
I'm jealous of the Hardy Boys is what I'm saying. I'm jealous of their purpose and the excitement that they have. They get to ride motorcycles. Like, they get to go to New York. I guess Nancy gets to travel quite a fair bit, but like,
Of course.
you know, yeah.
Well,
oh my God.
Score?
Oh God. Okay. Now this is actually really hard because it's like, are we comparing this to Nancy Drew? We have to be, right?
I guess, right? That's the whole point of covering it, is to see.
Because we've never covered anything else Hardy Boys, so I guess we've covered the TV show on a Scoop Sesh. But
that's true. Yeah, everything else is a crossover.
Yeah, so it's like we don't really have anything else to compare it to. So I guess I'm comparing it, stacking up to Nancy Drew's. I'm gonna say 4.
Okay,
I think it's a 4. I think it just scrapes a 4. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think overall I enjoyed reading it. I was really fascinated when I read it. I thought the mystery was okay, if a little bit like straightforward. I liked the twist of like the jewels not being hidden where we thought they were.
Yeah.
But I think it just wasn't super, like, in and of itself, it wasn't super compelling.
Yeah.
And while I liked reading it and I was interested in reading it and like looking at it, comparing it to Nancy Drew, outside of that, I wouldn't be super interested.
Fair. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I really wish I had read the original text because I bet that was really good.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I think that if we'd read the original, the scores might be a little bit different because of that. So it's hard to know. Yeah. Oh, I think I'm going to give it a 3.
Yeah.
As I said, the mystery just wasn't as strong enough for me that I would have liked it to have been. It was a little slow in the pacing. Again, too much time in the wig stores and too much taking breaks to go to wig stores. That was just a little strange. Would I read another Hardy Boys book? Absolutely. Would I rather read any Nancy Drew book instead? Yes. So ultimately, that's why the 3. But
that's
I
fair.
didn't dislike it, for sure. So
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Alrighty. Well, moving on.
Speaking of original texts and revised texts and mystery stories.
Speaking of, yeah, obviously we're going to be transitioning into a little bit of a different section. We're done with our Hardy Boys crossovers for the time being. Don't worry, everyone. I'm sure we'll come back. But yeah, we're going to read some more mystery stories, Kori.
Yay.
And specifically, we are going to try to read some where we can read both the original text and the revised text so that we can get some good compare-contrast going on. And so the first one up that our patrons have voted on is The Clue of the Velvet Mask. Yes, which I haven't read in a really long time. Yeah, I think I've read it before, but I couldn't tell you what it's about. So I'm excited.
I know that this is, of course, the last Nancy Drew book that Mildred ever did for the Syndicate. So it'll be interesting to see what her very last story was for them. But otherwise, I'm excited. The cover art is very pretty. It draws me in. So I want to know.
It's a good name. It's a good name, Velvet Mask.
Yeah.
Very specific. Very interesting.
What could be going on with that? I need to know.
Well, we will find out next time, Regular Drews, and we will see you then.
Yep. See you then.
Thank you for listening to Regular Nancy Drew. Email us at regularnancydrew@gmail.com.
If you like this episode, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe.
You can also follow us on Instagram at Regular Nancy Drew and Twitter at RegularND.
You can also support us on Patreon. Patrons at the $3 level vote on upcoming episode topics and get exclusive access to our Scoop Sesh series.
And all patrons receive early access to each episode as well as weekly bonus content.
And to all you regular Drews out there, thanks for listening.